Welcome to the Just Sneak channel. If you like what we're doing, support the channel, drop a like, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss new breakdowns. Thanks to everyone already with us, and your support helps the channel grow and makes the content even better. Priests forbidden, the scandalous secret the church wanted to bury. Introduction. The forbidden fruit of French cinema. France, 1973. The country is still reeling from the revolutionary storm of 1968. Society demands freedom in everything, from politics to sex. And at this very moment, a film hits the screens whose very title sounds like a slap in the face to church dogma. Priests forbidden. Just think about it. A film about how a servant of God breaks his most sacred vow, celibacy, and does so not in the darkness of sin, but in the name of love and honor. The director, Denys de La Patellière, a seasoned veteran of French cinema, takes on dangerous material. In the leading roles, Robert Hossein, a handsome heartthrob, and Claude Jade, the gentle muse of François Truffaut himself. It would seem like the recipe for a perfect melodrama, but behind the beautiful facade lurked a real hell. Pressure from the Vatican, censorship cuts, on-set quarrels, and career suicides for those who dared to go against the system. Today, we'll talk about a film that dared to ask a question that still resonates. Why can a Protestant pastor have a family, but a Catholic priest cannot? We'll uncover the dirty secrets of the production, reveal which actors hated each other off-camera, and why the film's finale sent shivers even through the most liberal critic. This is not just a movie review. This is the story of a rebellion that the church chose to forget. Context of creation. Revolution on film. An idea born in opposition. The late 60s and early 70s in France were a time of tectonic shift. Students were trashing the Sorbonne. Workers were on strike, and the Catholic Church, which for centuries had dictated to the French how to live and whom to love, suddenly found itself playing catch-up. In 1968, the whole world was discussing the encyclical Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul V's message banning all forms of contraception. For millions of Catholics, this became a point of no return. The Church talks about abstract dogmas while people live real life. It was in this boiling cauldron that producer Georges de Bourgard conceived the idea for a film that would strike at the most sensitive point: celibacy. Beauregard was no coward. Before this, he had produced socially charged films and wasn't afraid to tackle controversial topics. But even he understood. Poking a stick into the Vatican's hornet's nest was a deadly game. The screenplay was entrusted to Jean-Claude Barrault and François Boyer, masters of psychological drama. They based it on a simple but explosive story. The year is 1936. A young Parisian woman, Françoise, comes to a village for a holiday and falls in love with the local parish priest, Father Jean Dardin. Sounds banal? Well, that's where hell begins. The priest, defying his holy orders and vows, reciprocates her feeling. The girl becomes pregnant, and then it turns out that the church is ready to forgive the sin as long as the sinner stays silent and play by the rules. But Hossein's hero refuses to play by the rules. Launch conflicts. Who got cold feet and who went all in. When the script was ready, the hardest part began: finding money and approving the director. The very first studios Beauregard approached slammed their doors in his face. Paramount France, usually unafraid of experiments, politely declined, citing too specific material. Rumors circulated that an unspoken signal had come from Paris. The topic of celibacy is taboo. That's when Beauregard went all in. He brought René Pinière onto the project and founded a new production company, Bella Productions. It was a pure risk. If the film flopped at the box office or, worse, was banned by censors, they'd be ruined. But the main intrigue revolved around the director's chair. Denys de La Patellière's candidacy was met with hostility. Some said he was too old school, that his style was classic, not revolutionary. Others hinted at his complicated relationship with the press. However, de La Patellière turned out to be the man who could balance between scandal and art. He didn't want to make pornography under the guise of religion. He wanted to make a tragedy. The director and key players, stars who went against the system. Denys de La Patellière, aristocrat on the barricades. Denys de La Patellière is a legendary and controversial figure in French cinema, thought the Lucienne Legrand. By 1973, he had already directed hits like Thunder from Heaven and Taxi to Tobrukado. He had worked with Jean Gabin, with Bernard Blier himself, but his career always balanced on the edge of success and scandal. De La Patellière was disliked by the new wave. Truffaut and Godard considered him a reactionary, making cinema for parents. Perhaps that's why he seized upon priests forbidden with such ferocity, to prove that he could be sharper, angrier, and more relevant than any upstart from Cahiers du Cinéma. However, on set, the director faced pressure he hadn't expected. Rumors circulated that attempts were made to influence him through church circles. De La Patellière was a Catholic, albeit unorthodox, and this topic was personal for him. It was said he even consulted with bishops, asking their advice, how to make this film without being branded a heretic. The bishops, of course, advised him to make nothing at all. Robert Hossein, a rebel with faith. Robert Hossein is a separate chapter in this story. A man with a tragic biography, son of immigrants, he always played strong, rebellious heroes. But few know that Hossein was a deeply religious man. A paradox? Perhaps. Well, perhaps that did it only. But it was precisely this internal struggle between faith and human feelings that made his portrayal of Father Jean so poignant. Hossein, known for his liberal, even leftist views, saw his hero not as a debauchee, but as a martyr. He later admitted in interviews that the scene where his character is executed as a communist was one of the hardest of his career. He actually cried on set. But during filming, Hossein was a real tyrant. He constantly argued with De La Patellière about the interpretation of the character. He demanded that dialogues be rewritten, made harsher. The director's assistants recalled that Hossein once threw a chair in rage when told his character should be more humble. Claude Jade, a gentle victim of circumstances, Claude Jade, Truffaut's protégé, the star of Stolen Kisses, ended up in this story by chance, and perhaps against her will. She was the embodiment of tenderness, the ideal cover girl of the 70s, and she was given the role of Françoise, the girl who seduces a priest. Rumor had it that Jade hesitated for a long time about taking the project. She was afraid the image of a homewrecker would stick to her forever. Moreover, her entourage pressured her. Truffaut, who was very attached to her, allegedly tried to dissuade her from filming, considering the material too heavy and scandalous for her light persona. But Jade, showing unexpected firmness, agreed, and she didn't regret it. Her acting still brings tears to the eyes of even the harshest critic. Claude Piéplu and Pierre Mondy, atheists in cassocks. Special mention must go to Claude Piéplu, who played the second priest, Father Grégoire Anseli, a conservative who, despite disagreements, doesn't abandon his friend. Piéplu himself was known for his leftist, almost communist belief. For him, playing a priest who eventually becomes a bishop was a real challenge. It's said that he and Pierre Mondy, the communist Paul Lacusade, constantly ribbed each other on set. Well, Padre, going to confession today? These jibes created a unique atmosphere. A film about faith was made by people, many of whom were far from religion. But it was precisely this that allowed them to show the church without embellishment. As a bureaucratic machine, where there was almost no room left for humanity, the filming process and behind the scenes, hell in the name of art, cracks in the ideal facade. The filming of the movie took place in an atmosphere far from divine grace. If on screen we see a tender love story, behind the scenes real passions were boiling. Conflict hash. One, Hossein versus everyone. Robert Hossein, a man with a difficult personality, constantly clashed with cinematographer Henri Reiki. Hossein felt they were filming him too sweetly, too glossy. He demanded more grit, more realism, more sweat. In one scene, where his character was supposed to look exhausted. Hossein didn't sleep for 2 days before filming. The production team was horrified. Schedule delays cost money. Conflictage, too. Jade and the pressure of morality. The most difficult situation revolved around Claude Jade. The intimate scenes between her and Hossein were filmed in a closed pavilion, but rumors leaked to the press. The tabloids of the time wrote that Jade was being corrupted before the eyes of all France. The actress began receiving anonymous threatening letters. It got to the point where she was advised not to go out alone. Whether this was the work of religious fanatics or just disturbed individuals is unknown. But Jade was frightened to the point of wanting to quit filming. Pressure from above and wiretapping? The scariest thing was the invisible pressure. Studio employees whispered that men in plain clothes came to them asking about the film's materials. The church officially made no comment on the filming, but rumors spread through Paris that the Vatican, through its channels in France, was trying to block production. Producer Georges de Beauregard called receiving calls from unknown people advising him to come to his senses before it's too late. He paid no attention until one night. A warehouse with sets burned down. The official version was a short circuit. The unofficial version was arson. The police hushed it up, but the suspicion lingered with everyone. Actor replacements and cut scenes. There was a scene intended to be pivotal that never made it into the film. An episode where a pregnant Françoise comes to the bishop to plead for Jean. According to the script, the bishop was not only supposed to refuse, but also humiliate the girl, hinting that she was a tool of the devil. The scene was shot, but during editing, De La Patellière received a call from above. Some sources named the then Minister of Culture. He was gently but firmly given to understand that the image of a sadistic bishop might be misinterpreted and cause unnecessary unrest. The scene was cut. The surviving footage, it said, is still held in someone's private collection. Plot and structure, the war for human dignity. The setup that still shocked. The film's action begins in 1936. Young Françoise Bernardo, a Parisian from a good family, comes to the countryside to visit relatives. There she meets the local parish priest, Father Jean d'Ault. The acquaintance goes far beyond parish etiquette. The girl falls in love. The priest knows it's a sin, but can't help himself. A year later, in 1937, Françoise returns. And then, what happens shatters their lives. Passion ignites between them. The girl becomes pregnant. No, the hypocrisy of the system. When the truth comes out, the most interesting part begins. Both Françoise's father and the bishop act like conspirators. They don't scream about sin, they don't call for repentance. They simply want to hush it up. The plan is cynical to the extreme. Give the child to an orphanage and send the priest for quiet penance to the Louvre. Irony of fate. Not to a monastery, but to serve in a museum. The church is presented not as a punishing structure, but as a law firm figuring out how to cover up the track. Jean, played by Hossein, looks at this conspiracy and feels only one thing: disgust. He refuses to obey. He declares, "I acted like a man, and I'll answer like a man." It is then that he is forbidden to minister, stripped of his holy orders, his right to hear confessions, to be a priest, an unexpected ally. The film's most powerful scene is when a local communist activist, Paul Lacassade Pierre Mondy, extends a helping hand to the outcast Jeune. An atheist, a fighter against religion, gives shelter to the former priest. It's a gesture of supreme humanity, striking at the hypocrisy of the good Christians who turned away from their pastor. The second priest, Grégoire Ancelli, despite ideological differences, also doesn't abandon his friend. The film asks a devastating question. Who is closer to Christ? Those who wear the cassock and condemn, or those who, being godless, share their last crust of bread? War eine catastrophic finale. Varende Yotsi, Isabellet Nordetis, Udeko begins. Jean and Grégoire join the resistance. The bishop, learning of Ancelli's ties with communists, with the same Lacassade, forbids him too. The church's logic is ironclad. communists are worse enemies than the Nazis. The climax comes when Jean goes to meet François and his son, but instead of his beloved woman, he finds ruins. François is killed during a bombardment. Jean takes his son, but the court, under pressure from the church, or just through cruel bureaucracy, sends the boy to an orphanage. Jean has everything taken from him: his holy orders, his love, his child. In the finale, he helps Lacazette and Anceli escape to Spain, but falls into the hands of the Vichy regime himself. A firing squad. The last shot, the priest is killed as a communist. He fought for one thing and ended up with another. The infuriating epilogue. The action moves to 1970, Tarantide. Anceli, the same liberal priest who helped his friend, has become a bishop. A young priest comes to him and asks the same question that tormented Jean. I have fallen in love with a girl. I want to get married. And the old bishop is silent. Before him is the image of his fallen friend, whom the system devoured for daring to be human. The system hasn't changed. It just changed faces. Intrigues around the release. The explosion everyone was waiting for. Premiere amidst boos and applause. The premiere in Paris is Yetta. The theater was electrified. On one side, the liberal audience, hippies, students who were expecting a takedown of the church. On the other, Catholic activists who came to cause a scene. Within 20 minutes of the film starting, shouts erupted in the hall. Some yelled shame. Others applauded standing up. Exiting the cinema, a brawl broke out between viewers and a group of religious protesters. Police cordoned off the neighborhood. Critics split into two camps. The conservative newspaper Le Figaro called the film a filthy lampoon against servants of the faith. Leftist publications, conversely, trumpeted that it was cinema of the highest order, exposing the sores of society. Boycotts and bans. Despite the scandal, or perhaps because of it, the film played to packed houses. But the church struck back. In several French dioceses, priests forbade their parishioners from seeing the film from the pulpit, calling it a mortal sin. In Lyon, a group of traditionalist Catholics picketed cinemas. Rumor had it that the film was sent for additional review by the Morality Commission, and if not for the wave of public support, it would have simply been banned from distribution. At Is, after the premiere, the film rolled over the participants' destinies like a steamroller. Robert Hossein became persona non grata in conservative Catholic circles for a long time. They held this role against him for decades. Although he continued acting, the stain remained. Claude Jade faced something terrible. The role in Priests became karmic for her. It was rumored that because of this film, she was denied some important award. But the main thing was that the image of the girl who seduced a priest haunted her. For a delicate, lyrical actress, this was a heavy burden. Claude Piéplu, despite his leftist leanings, received an unexpected blow. Some far-right figures accused him for playing a priest, of betraying national interest. Absurd, but true. Interesting facts and dirty details, what the newspapers kept quiet. And now, dear viewers, let's dive into the murkiest swamp. The things that never made it into official chronicles, but were whispered about in kitchens and smoking rooms of the cinematic scene. Who really hated whom? Officially, all the actors spoke of a wonderful atmosphere on set. Lise et Hollandeville, managing the result in this term. Hossein and Piéplu couldn't stand each other. Piéplu, an intellectual and wit, considered Hossein an upstart and a poser. Hossein, in turn, called Piéplu a theaterite. He doesn't understand cinema. Once, they almost came to blows in the dressing room. The subject of dispute, whether to interpret Anceli's character as a traitor or a victim of circumstance. The argument escalated to shouts of "you just can't act," and "you just can't think." A love triangle off camera. Persistent rumors circulated that a romance had flared up between Robert Hossein and Claude Jade. The rumors were fueled by the fact that on screen, their passion looked too real. Jade was married, but it was whispered that she was crazy about Hossein's charisma. Hossein, who by then had already experienced several high-profile affairs, kept mum, but witnesses recalled that they lingered together on the set far too often. Who was set up? The darkest story involves songwriter Jean-Claude Barrault. He wrote the original screenplay, but in the credits he's listed third after François Boyer and de La Patellière himself. It was rumored that Boyer, a seasoned dramatist, simply rewrote Barrault's text, adding a few dialogues and sold it to the studio as his own. Barrault tried to sue, but was threatened with never being hired again. He shut up and faded into the shadows. Incidentally, according to some sources, the idea to move the action to the 30s to show that the church doesn't change over the centuries belonged to Barrault. Cut scenes. What we lost. There was a scene cut after the first screening. In it, Father Grégoire Anzelli, now a bishop in 1970, was hearing the confession of a prostitute. The woman asked him, "Holy Father, if I sleep with men for money, will I go to hell? And if a priest sleeps with a woman for love, where does he go?" Anzelli was silent. The scene was so powerful that the studio management got scared. This wasn't cinema anymore, it was a sermon. They cut it out completely. Expert analysis, what worked and what fell apart. Ranks, honesty on the edge. Despite all the hell surrounding its production, the film turned out brilliant where it mattered. Acting. Ended. Hossein played the best role of his career. His Jean is neither a hypocrite nor a lecher. He's a man who chose love and paid for it with his life, while Jade is charm and pain personified. Their duo is the epitome of on-screen chemistry. Screenplay. Screenplay. Yes, it tried to combine too much. Love, war, politics, the resistance. But it is precisely this multi-layeredness that makes the film not just a melodrama, but an epic about the first half of the 20th century. Direction de La Patellière proved he was no reactionary. Indeed, the scenes in the resistance trenches, the execution, the silence in the bishop's house, all are filmed with such tension that you forget you're watching 70s cinema. Weaknesses. Where the film failed. The main drawback is naivety. As one reviewer on IMDb rightly noted, the priest doesn't grapple with moral questions. He's too individualistic and doesn't notice what's happening in the world around him. For the 70s, this was forgivable. For a modern viewer, it seems strange. Va in Spain, fascism in Germany, and he only thinks about his beloved. The second drawback is the ending. The 1970 epilogue, where Anselli is silent, is certainly powerful, but it leaves the viewer in a state of frustration. You want to shout? So what did you answer? The film ends on a half-breath, and many viewers feel cheated. Why was the film forgotten? Despite the scandals, the film didn't become a cult classic. Why? The answer is cynical. Because the church won. The issue of celibacy was never resolved. In the 70s and 80s, the Catholic Church toughened its rhetoric, and anyone who delved into this topic was declared a heretic. The film was simply no longer shown on television. It wasn't bought for foreign distribution. It remained in France, gathering dust on the shelves of Cinemathèque. Conclusion: why it's worth seeing today, Priests Forbidden is not just a film. It's a mirror that was held up to the face of society 50 years ago, and it shattered. Too much truth, too much pain. Denys de La Patellière's picture is a cry that man is more important than the system, that love is stronger than dogma, that a church which doesn't listen to people turns into a bureaucratic apparatus, killing its best. The ending, where the bishop is silent before the young priest, is a verdict. It means nothing has changed. The circle is closed, and the new generation will be tormented by the same questions as the previous one. In 2024, watching this film is not just interesting, it's necessary. Because the debates about priests' right to a family, the right to love, the right to be oneself, they haven't subsided to this day. And until they do, films like Priests Forbidden will remain relevant. This cinema is a monument to all those broken by the system, to all who dared to say no, to all who chose love over fear. With you was your movie reviewer. Hit like if you want more stories about scandalous films, Subscribe so you don't miss new episodes, and tell me in the comments whether you found this movie interesting or not.